This evening is very special because this is my childhood friend. It's a dream of poetry, as something you talk about as excited teenagers. Then to somehow miraculously publish books in the world. It's amazing, it's unbelievable. But I'm going to read what an older, more successful poet said about him so that you don't think, that I'm just playing favorite. Colin Chiner said, "When I first read the work that forms this book, I was struck by the ways in which myth, magic, and music work with and against each other on the level of the line. In short, I was wooed by a poetic intelligence, namely Aderibigbe's sense of material and its engagement through the kind of tensile curiosity readers experience as lyric force. There's something ancient in Aderibigbe's lyric awareness, but something futuristic as well. The two combining with the present in ways that transfix, recalling what happens when a lute is noted in the music of today. Casually metaphoric, Aderibigbe moves through his landscapes while uttering in argot of prophecy. His speech a microtone above the everyday, thus understandable at God's level, but dreamily a bit out of reach, leaving room for our ascending. Is transcendent. This book, this gift from this observant, this wandering mind." I was like, that's my boy! It's such a dream come true. It's magical. Aderibigbe was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. His first book, How the End First Showed, won the Brittingham Prize. He has received fellowships from Sewanis Writers Conference, the J. Merrill House, Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center, the Omi and Ledick House, the UCross Foundation. He received his master's in creative writing from Boston University, where he was mentored by the former poet laureate of the US, Robert Pinsky, and his PhD from Florida State University. He has taught at Mississippi State University and is now a senior fellow at Bard University. One of the things I loved in Dami's work is that there's always an intimacy of diaspora that does not announce itself. It's such a model for me, the mastery of it. This intimacy of diaspora expresses itself in the ecology, for instance. The mangoes, the cashews, there are roosters, there are kids, there are daughters and mothers on the porch eating fried fish. So that if you're from the Caribbean, or the south of the US, or from continental Africa, or from Latin America, this landscape also belongs to you. There's something it does with bilingualism that is always working in Yoruba, which is the language of our intimacy, and English, which is the language of power, right? It moves between both languages without apology, right? There is no lexicon, there's no index at the back of the book explaining the words, right? Even more pleasurably, it does it at a level of images, so that even the things that's written in English, I'm like, that is my grandmother's tongue. When I asked him about it today, he said, in my poems, I just always want to bring my people with me. What a joy that I'm part of his people, and this evening through these poems, you will also be a part of his people. Please make welcome, dear.
How's everyone doing today?
Everyone can hear me, right? Yes. Yeah, sometimes I feel like I don't even need a microphone because I'm so, I know. My friends, they usually call me Sergeant. I don't know if you guys know that brand of phone. This old brand of phone is so loud. So, they just call me, that was my nickname. For being loud. So thank you for being here today. I know it's cold out, for braving the cold to be here, and thank you to the Fierce Flower, for, I think it's such a wonderful space, for Black poetry, for all poetry, we're at a time where, I think it's difficult to do any kind of writing at all. So to have a space such as Fierce Flower that is dedicated to like black poetry, not just contemporary, but even historically, I think it's amazing. So yeah, thank you so much, and to the Omi Bringer, thank you so much, and Lauren, thank you. Thank you, Jasmine, Nakima, and Tara. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you guys have put into bring me there. Thank you so much. So I always I love to start with Lagos because it's my hometown, it's where I'm from. But also it's kind of weird to call it hometown because it's not a town. It's a city of 22 million people. So imagine calling that hometown. And yeah, so before reading Lagos, just to give a brief context, just to talk about the book, and which I always mention. I've described the book variously as I've been reading from it, but one way that I've come to really like describing it, I also think is simple and a little bit lazy, but it captures a lot, is that I see this as a collection of poems that adopts various traditional poetic forms, right? Primarily, but not exclusively, right? But primarily European poetic forms, and what I like to call English influenced poetic form, as a way of acknowledging, and I'm going somewhere there, as a way of acknowledging British influence on various aspects of life, right, in Nigeria. My first name is Michael, but I go by DM, and so we have names like Michael, Felicia, and so on and so forth, which are all as a result of colonialism, right, passed down as a result of that. So it's a fact that these influences exist. But then what I also did with most of the forms here is that I broke the rules of each of these forms to gesture towards the fact that while these influences exist, right, that we found a way to Africanize them, found a way to kind of like make these influences ours, because it's also factual that we have our own version of English, right? We have Pidgin, we have our own way of celebrating Christmas, and so on and so forth, right? So I think that's kind of like an easy way to put it. So so I'll read some poems, and temporarily most of the poems that I will read are set in post-colonial Nigeria, and then I'll read a couple of poems that were kind of like said before that, and then maybe try to come back as well, because that is what the book does. So Lagos. I stand in the nest of noise. Discordant and downfall buses fill the day's lungs. On either side of me, stores made out of plastic bags. Spinach, okra, bell pepper on parade like national pride. I come back to memories seeking shelter from untamed sun. A schoolboy sucks juice out of a finger of sugar cane at a bus stop. His friend, closely behind, dances to Olamide's early duro booming out of the nearby barber shop. In front of a face-my-face building, a shriveled voice shreds a fable for the party of teenage years. I stand in the land of lagoons, where sons of the soil became visitors to their own visitors. As local law tells us, Eko Akete, Ilu Ogbon, Lagos, the land of my mother and my mother. This land where whatever is left of me will shrink to dust. So I will. So I read autobiography, which is also just set in, post-colonial Nigeria, as I call it. By the papaya tree, a dragonfly wandered under a green sky. Nearby, a tribe of tomatoes and a family of fluted pumpkin leaves lashed onto slices of sunlight for lunch. Cicadas covered all corners of the afternoon with chorus. In the shadow of the brick fence next to my room's window, midges converged like an overcast above a leftover of the previous night's rain. A renowned rooster returned for another portion of my generosity. On the balcony, my mother and her sister talked and toasted over palm wine and fried fish. A meter left, my cousin ran wildly from one end of the compound to the other, like all animals in their natural habitats. This was before the fire. So I will read a poem titled Duplex. I'll tell you. So I'm sure some of us might be, and I say some of us because it's not yet a form that is as popular that I think it should be, right? So some of us might be familiar with this duplex form, which is a black poetic form invented by Jericho Brown, which according to Jericho, it describes it as a sonnet, right? So which at its basic definition is a poem of 14 lines, right? And I know there can be other arguments about that. Oh, shit, it's the volta, but at the basic definition is a poem of 14 lines. Describes it as a blues poem just because of the repetition, right? There's a line that comes, and then the next line that comes after, sort of like verse of that, is a variant of that, and also describes it as a ghazal because it emphasizes the independence of the couplet. So, so there will be a lot of repetition here. Duplex, I'll tell you all about desire. One night, a man packed up his bag and walked. One night, my father packed up his bag and walked. His big brother became the story. My big brother once told a story. He ended up choking on a stroke of joy. If right is true, would you choke on joy? So asked my last girlfriend in high school. I asked my last girlfriend about high school memories. She's a genius in disguise. Memories are geniuses in disguise. Love without faith is lost, my wife once told me. Love without faith is lost. My wife once told me, or called me, what do you know of desire? So I'll read Canton, the next one. So it's still kind of like a fairly new poem, and isn't it weird how, you have all these poems that you've written, and then some, you still don't know the pages though, but you've been reading them and then, and then people that are smarter than me, they just kind of, bend, kind of fold this thing, but I'm like, I like my book, I don't want to fold it. So sorry, thank you for your patience. And So my first book kind of deals a lot with domestic abuse, right? Women in my family experienced, and it's kind of like a theme that I was, I kind of wrote a lot about it in my first book, right? And I was, really trying to run away from me, this time because, I get a lot of questions, which are fine, about, oh shoot, is your mom now okay, that kind of thing. But, my mom, she's passed, So I was like, well, we were just running away from it, but, there's just something, and I tried, but, it's just so hard. So why compiling poems about, this, the points that are set in, the post-colony? I just couldn't kind of like, it's a theme that keeps finding itself back to me, but different, the various aspect of this, of this event, not necessarily duplicating or repeating the same event, but just, different aspects, So this poem kind of like, just does that, just talks about what the speaker's mother experienced, and and I decided to use the poem too because it's a form that emphasizes repetition. I use repetitive forms a lot, but also it's something cyclical, right? I mean, my mom died 15 years ago, right? Almost 16 years ago. It's still something that that I wake up and still kind of remember, it's cyclical. So that's just what this does. So yeah. My father's hands were fluent as a boxer's. The first time I saw them at work, I was barely 6. My mother had mounted off a mild protest. She couldn't use that mouth for days. The next time I saw them at work, I was barely 6. That morning was heavy with noise. My mother couldn't use her mouth for days. Afterward, silence became her first language. That morning was heavy with noise. My mother shrugged him off in mild protest, since silence was her only language. I think of her face, his hands, fluent as a boxer's. So I will, move a little bit to like the next half of the work, which looks into the colonial period, which that's the best way to describe it. And so this poem is titled "Christening an Eviscerian," and I think I mentioned that earlier today. I talked briefly about this poem earlier, when we had a workshop and we were talking, so it's kind of like a poem about like the naming of Nigeria, where I'm from, and I think about how even the idea of Christianing, right, is something that is also passed down, right, from colonialism, like to name a child, to Christian a child, So it's just like the naming of Nigeria, and as I mentioned before, it's just like so there are like, there's the western region, the eastern region, the northern region, and other small, regions or kingdoms, as you can call it, the idea of cultural evolution. These people evolved on their own, they were living. So when the British came, they just kind of like put everybody together around the Niger area, like around the river Niger, so basically Nigeria means Niger area. And I mentioned that one of the main reasons why, one was that it was considered a real estate property. But in addition to that was also that they didn't have enough personnel on ground. So they just wanted they brought 3 different areas together, then they can just have few people walk and, overlook that area, So the repercussion, among other things, is that, as soon as it became Nigeria, like English sort of became the destiny, right? It became like the official language and all that. So I just adopted a poetic form that spells out the English alphabet, just to reflect that, So so I'll just read it, and it's very, very conversational because it's from the point of view of the person who did the naming. So, and I take it that they weren't like the poets. So I wanted to reflect that too. Thank you. After a moment, black-eyed bean, cocoa bean, buried in sacks in the cargo hold. columbite, gold, pegmatite, tantalite, dragged onto the lower decks. Every single day, a crowded ship sailed from the coast of Lagos to Bristol. Grenade, gun, gunpowder, guns. How did anyone think we made the Africans dig in the sun, sow in the rain, reap in the sun? Joining each man was his wife and children. Kids old enough to walk joined them. Later, each man, under the control of another man, controlled his family to fill the sacks. Nigeria, Sudan, West African Guinea. Of all names that swarmed to the back of my mind, I had the pleasure of coming up with the names. These three, quite frankly, stood out like stars. For a real estate property, any of those names sounds about fine. In the end, I settled for the one I coined last, Nigeria. Bible, mirror, umbrella, vase. We arrived bearing gifts, knowing very well what they wanted, what we wanted. We arrived sharing gifts, knowing what we wanted, killing xenophobia, top on the list. For a full year, we did this. Then we attacked. Lion, lioness, zeal, zeal, zebra, 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 zilch. Thank you, sir. You see what I was saying about being so loud and being sergeant? So I was like, yeah, I got this. So I don't need the mic. Thank you. Okay. So I'll just try to read. I already tied a poem, which is the Crown Science. It's called its Second Division. And shout out to Nadasha Treadway, whose poem Native God inspired this. So just briefly about its second division as well. These were a group of forcibly conscripted individuals, right, who formed the colonial part of the British Army. I mean, there are kind of like several branches, right, but at least from Nigeria, and so they were mainly Nigerians, just taking. And so they went to fight in Burma. And so when they fought for the British, and they kind of won the war, and everyone was kind of tense except these black soldiers. So from Nigeria, so this is from the point of view of one of them, which every event in the poem is factual, but I created this guy, this character. So I want anyone to say, oh shoot, that guy really suffered. Who is it? I mean, I don't know him, but I created him and I know a lot of him as well. You know what I mean? So it's a character I created, but the events around him, were real. September 1943. I see it on the last row of my mind. The day finally lodging in my calves. At every turn of thought, I see all that still breaks in my past. My wife, our twin toddlers, our blooming delays. At every turn of thought, I see that sunny day, while whistling my way through the garden I tended, each of my palms a bed of blisters. 3 men, British, barged into my view. 2 grabbed me by my underpants. The third, the man who owned the garden, stood beside them. At every turn of thought, I hear his words. He'll be useful. He knows English. September 1943. His words to me, be useful, teach them English, or at the very least, interpret their duties. Commander Bruce is a man of few words. Before the words come the boots. Before the words always come the boots, as we found out that night, our first night. In truth, we failed shooting test, failed to finish building a fort or cleaning up the base. We failed to understand that we could not sleep until the commander's words had come to pass. In truth, it was our first night on land in a week. While we slept, leather feet, large and small, and sizes between, traveled from our chest to toes. Our bodies, signs of a bruised future. September 1943. My bruises, signs of a future that awaits should I deviate from the rules. It was my work that every black man knew a new English word each day. It was my work that every black man fell in love with the battlefield. It was my work that every black man's dusk and daybreak were born from the mouth of the general. It was my work that every black man ended every sentence with "sir." It was my work not to call white lies lies. I was handed a pair of journals and ink. I slipped out a spear with which I write right now. September 1943. There is no spare time to write. Right now I should be sleeping. It's one for the other. But as Chidi, my closest friend here, always says, it's only fair that history remembers the sound of our voice. He was in his living room, about to eat dinner with his wife and 3 daughters, when some feet tore through his front door. Among us, there are as many children as spirits. Look at Taddy, thin as a lizard's tail. He had just got out of school, his first day of high school, when a colony of colonial officials swarmed and shoved him into a waiting van. June 1944. They swarmed and shoved me into a waiting hole, the British soldiers. Since that night, I've stopped raising my voice on the battlefield to any of the boys who fails to discern an enemy's trap, whose feet make a deadly choice. Our British superiors, riding on armored tanks behind, never mentioned these traps either, leading the easy ground to furiously feed on our boys. In fact, days before that night, Commander Bruce pulled me into his tent. That day, he called our dead necessary baits. That day, he vowed to drown me in sand when next my voice rose on the battlefield. December 1944. Smoke rose from their bodies on the battlefield, our nearly dead. Many of them arrived here in Burma about 2 months ago. Their first night in camp, they revealed their journey as though they just came out of a coma. They woke to themselves on a ship sailing, taken from their babies' babblings, wives' kisses, mothers' wraps arms, feast on their faces, or stomach, last light in their memories. They woke to themselves on a ship sailing. In Kenya, they scaled trees, hid, shot for 4 years till the war was won. The war won, surviving men shoved on a ship sailing for Ceylon, fought there for 5 months, then to Burma they sailed. April 1945. Fought for 19 months. Soon, from Burma our ship sails. Bags strapped to back. I look back at tent after tent, all now empty, and think of men whose tails turn the night blue, men whose homes sent our part of camp into gyration, men whose songs have become mine, ours, men whose bones have become mine, ours, men whose eyes have become mine, ours. The surviving few are among the crowd, like me, waiting on the commander to make his way to the podium. Hamid, our British superiors here splitting cheers and chest pounding, we, the African contingent, link our arms. April 1945. We, the African contingent, link our arms while the commander gives his victory speech. Sounds of clashing palms follow every sentence. In his speech, he extends his gratitude to the Queen and the Prime Minister. In his speech, he extends his gratitude to all the British soldiers who made this victory a reality. In his speech, he extends his gratitude to British people everywhere. In his speech, he extends no further gratitude. Sounds of clashing palms follow. We follow the British soldiers' order to the ship. I sit in the first row, home on my mind. So I'm just going to read one more poem, and so I'm going to read this poem entitled "English." It's a ghazal, right? And I think I've talked a lot about like English and what it means and everything. So this is just a poem that just describes, I guess, my ambivalent feeling towards like English and things like that. I mean, it's still the language I speak, right? So, yeah. So, English. There are 8 people in my family. Only one speaks English. I was born with Yoruba. At 13, I came to English. Before my tongue's baptism, I was tied to silence. I had learned the stupid speak Yoruba, the smart English. Once, a boy from my new school denied his mother to me because she knew no word in English. Grandma bought me my first dictionary the day I came home to hide an old ragged textbook called Neo-Practical English. On Mother's proud days, I was the dictionary on which she relied. DM, the name I found shortly after her death through English. Okay.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, DM. Can we give another round of applause for DM? Yes, thank you. So at this time, we do have a few minutes for questions. I thought people might have, some questions. Pick DM's brain. We have this fantastic poet here up on stage. So please, are there any questions in the audience? Yes, you there.
I want to know what your favorite form is.
So, just for those on the online and those who didn't hear, the question was, what is your favorite form?
Yeah, thank you. I think right now, I enjoy any forms that emphasize this repetition, right? But just to pick one to answer the question, I think I like the duplex form right now. Yeah, because it's new, it's fresh, so I like it. I like the duplex form right now.
Did you have a hand up?
Oh, okay. No, okay. Sorry.
Yes, what's your question?
Thanks so much for your reading. I noticed both in the colonial section and in the photo that food plays a big role. You have papaya in the post-colonial era, back at the colonial, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, for you, has food always played a role in your poetry? Like, how is it? It seems to be a touchstone for you. I'd just love to hear more about that.
The question is about the presence of food in the book and how it's a touchstone for DM.
Thank you so much for that question. First of all, I'm a foodie, so I think it shows. So I love food a lot. But but in my poetry, it's always been a touchstone, as you mentioned. It's always been something very important, as with a lot of other plants and places, right? Because geography plays, defined settings. They play an important role in my writing. So food is one way in which I think I'm also able to, I was talking to, Brenda and I were having a conversation today, and I was talking about how when I write, I tend to go back to Nigeria creatively. I tend to be in that space. I tend to inhabit that space. I tend to feel the breeze, the warm breeze of Lagos, to be able to kind of like write, mentally, So food is also one of those things where I tend to think about. And I think it also helps me in terms of like, when I talk about well-defined setting, it also helps me in terms of like originality, right? Because there are like certain, food that are just, that you only find in like, western part of Nigeria, for example, you find in Nigeria as a whole. So, so when I think about like food, not just, and I don't want to limit it to food, because food, I think from the points I read here, food were prominent, but there are also like things like plants and places that I tend to emphasize on, like just to drive home originality and the idea that they tend to like let at least the reader know, even if I was like the primary reader, but they tend to let the reader know where I'm from. Yeah. So.
Any more questions? Going once. Going twice. Okay. All right. One more applause for DM, everybody. Thank you.